You ever have those mornings where the shop feels like it's holding its breath, like the tools are just waiting for you to make the first move?
I think that's just the caffeine hasn't hit your bloodstream yet, Tiger, but I get it. It's May 13th, the birds are screaming outside, and we've got a stack of news that's going to make a lot of people's wallets either very happy or very empty.
That's the maker's curse, isn't it? Every time a new catalog drops, my retirement fund starts sweating. But look, we've got some serious ground to cover today. We're talking about lasers that could probably carve a turkey from across the street and how to turn a pile of dead laptops into a vacation fund.
Let's start with the heavy metal. You were eyeing that Ocean Machinery Gladiator press release like it was a classic Mustang.
Man, the Gladiator, it's a beam laser, but that name, it sounds like something that should be fighting lions in the Colosseum. It's a beast. It's got this one footprint setup that does the drilling, the sawing, and the coping.
For the uninitiated, which is me on my less than stellar days, why is one footprint such a big deal?
Efficiency is a cold mistress, Alex. Back in the day, and I've got the scars to prove it, you'd have to forklift a 20-foot I-beam from the saw station, pray you didn't clip a support pillar, drag it over to the drill, then move it again for marking. It was like trying to parallel park a whale. This thing just sits there and says, "Give me the steel, I'll do the rest." It's a structural steel shop's dream.
And while the Gladiator is building skyscrapers, Forney is trying to move into our garages with the X Series.
Yeah, the X Series is interesting. It's that pivot toward power in a lunchbox. They're pushing these portable welding and plasma units. I've always been a bit wary of things you can carry with one hand that are supposed to melt metal, but they figured out the inverter tech. It's for the guy who needs to fix a gate at a farm, or the mobile welder who's tired of hauling a trailer that weighs as much as a small house.
You mentioned a new flush cutting system too. That's specifically for the industrial crowd, right?
Right, it's plasma based. Imagine you've got a massive lug welded onto a ship hull or a tank. Traditionally, you'd grind for 3 days or use a torch and leave a mess that looks like a beaver chewed on it. This system lets you slice it off perfectly flush. It's the difference between using a hatchet and a scalpel. I did a flush cut once with an angle grinder on a trailer hitch. Let's just say I ended up buying a lot of body filler and a very large student driver sticker to cover the evidence.
See, that's why we have the AWS professional program, to stop you from improvising with an angle grinder.
Exactly. If you're serious about the trades path, the 2026 AWS program is the North Star. We're looking at Fab Tech coming up, and they're really leaning into the research side.
I've heard you say that AWS certifications are the gold standard, but for someone listening who's just starting out, is it worth the paper it's printed on if you're not planning on working for NASA?
Absolutely, because it's independent. It doesn't matter if you learned in your uncle's shed or a fancy technical college. If you pass an AWS cert, you're telling the world, I meet the global standard. It's a universal language. It's like being a chef. Anyone can fry an egg, but the certification says you won't poison the customers. If you want to move into inspection or engineering, that's your golden ticket.
Speaking of golden tickets, let's talk about the Maker Mogul segment. We're looking at e-waste gold. Now, when I think of e-waste, I think of that drawer in my kitchen full of old charging cables and an iPhone 4 with a spicy battery. How is that a business?
It's a gold mine, Alex, literally and figuratively. We've been looking at how people like Angie, who's a total wizard at this, source inventory for $0.
Free is my favorite price point.
It's about being a solution. Local businesses have stacks of old servers, laptops, and specialized medical equipment they technically aren't allowed to just throw in the dumpster because of environmental laws. You walk in and say, I will professionally remove this and ensure it's recycled or repurposed. You're doing them a favor.
And then you're stripping it for parts?
Sometimes, but often it's about finding the weird stuff inside. High-end capacitors, specialized circuit boards, or even just the silver and gold recovery. But the real money is in the components that are legacy. There's some manufacturing plant in Ohio running on a computer from 1998. And if a specific board blows, they'll pay $500 for a replacement because the alternative is a $10 million factory upgrade.
So you're basically a digital scavenger.
I prefer technological archaeologist, but yeah, it's about diversification. Side Hustle Nation dropped some gems this week about not putting all your eggs in the Etsy basket. If the algorithm changes and your handmade wooden spatulas stop showing up in search, you'd better have some e-waste components moving on eBay or a local repair service.
It sounds like the key is just not being a one-trick pony.
Exactly. If you only have one tool in the bag, you're eventually going to find a screw that won't turn.
Okay, let's get into the DIY mastery stuff. This is my favorite part of the week, this river-style fly fishing box. Tiger, it's gorgeous, but tell me the truth. Is this just another way to use up the 5 gallons of epoxy resin you bought during the pandemic?
Hey, I feel attacked. But look, the river table trend has been beaten to death. We've all seen enough walnut and blue plastic dining tables to last 3 lifetimes. But shrinking it to a fly fishing box, that's where the craft comes back in.
Why is smaller better? Other than my lack of floor space?
It's about the details. When you're working that small, every bubble in the resin looks like a beach ball. It forces you to be precise, and it uses scraps. You take those little offcuts of curly maple or bog oak that aren't big enough for a birdhouse, and you turn them into an heirloom. It's a weekend project that actually tests your patience.
Speaking of testing patience, I watched that no-edit CNC signage video you recommended. It was surprisingly stressful.
That's the most honest woodworking video on the internet right now. Usually these YouTube makers edit out the part where the router bit snaps or the software decides to move the spindle 2 inches to the left for no reason. This video shows the oops moments.
He almost took a chunk out of the clamps, didn't he?
He did, and that's the reality. CNC isn't set it and forget it. It's a conversation between you and a very fast, very sharp robot that doesn't care about your feelings. Watching someone troubleshoot a homing error in real time is worth more than 10 perfect tutorials. It makes the tech feel human.
We also saw that Brooklyn backyard project, ipe wood and steel frames in a space the size of a postage stamp.
Man, EEP is a beast to work with. It's so dense it doesn't even float in water. It'll dull a saw blade just by looking at it. But in a tiny urban space, it's perfect. It lasts forever and looks like $1 million. It's a great example of using high-end materials where you don't need much of them, but where they have the biggest impact.
We've covered a lot today, from massive beam lasers to tiny fly boxes. What's the common thread here?
I think it's about being unafraid to scale. Whether you're scaling up into industrial welding certifications or scaling down into intricate resin work, the craft is the same. It's about solving a problem with your hands and your brain.
And maybe not being afraid to fail on camera.
Especially that. Look, I've spent 20 years trying to look like I know what I'm doing, and the best things I've ever made came right after I absolutely ruined a perfectly good piece of timber. You have to give yourself permission to be a disaster sometimes.
That should be the TigerDen motto. Permission to be a disaster.
Don't put that on a t-shirt yet. But seriously, the takeaway for today is simple. Don't ignore the waste. Whether it's the e-waste in a corporate dumpster or the exotic wood scrap in your bin, there's value in the things other people are too busy or too bored to look at.
I love that. So go out there, grab some free inventory, or finally try that resin pour you've been nervous about.
And if you snap a bit on the CNC, just remember, you're just giving that robot a very expensive lesson in humility.
Thanks for joining us in the den today. We'll be back tomorrow with more tools, more trades, and more ways to turn your garage into a powerhouse.
Stay hungry, stay making, and keep your thumbs away from the blade.